They should have known from the way he walked in, not hurried, not scared, not even curious, just calm. Measured. Like he'd been here before, the prison gates groaned open, and the cold gray walls of Fulton Penitentiary swallowed Elijah Kane. Like the jaws of some ancient beast, guards barely glanced at him. Inmates leaning against fences, lifting weights, pretending not to stare, took one look at the tall, broad-shouldered black man in shackles and smirked. Another fresh fish. Another target. He didn't look like much. Close-cut beard, graying at the edges, standard-issue orange jumpsuit, eyes lowered beneath the shadow of his brow, quiet, reserved, probably soft, probably broken already, but he wasn't. They didn't know what those eyes had seen, what those hands had done. He hadn't just survived war. He had been trained to end it, but inside these walls that history meant nothing. Here you were what the others thought you were, and they thought Elijah Kane was weak. Block C was known as the meat grinder. It chewed up men like him lone. Wolves with no gang, no tattoos, no affiliations. Elijah didn't speak when they marched him past the screaming cells. Didn't flinch when inmates banged on the bars and called him every name in the book. He just kept walking. Like a man counting steps in his head, 30 paces to the door, 10 more to the bunk, sit, breathe, watch, and he did watch everything, every movement, every whisper, every eye contact, who controlled the smokes, who ran the guards, who paid for protection, and who was being hunted quietly from cell to cell. Elijah had learned long ago that silence was a weapon. And here it made him invisible, but not for long. On the third day, the gang noticed him. They called themselves the Black Vultures. 5 men, all muscle, no brains, led by a twitchy ex-enforcer named Leon Gage, who'd done 7 years for manslaughter and ran the yard like it was his personal kingdom. They didn't like new blood staying silent. They didn't like eyes that didn't look away, and they especially didn't like anyone who sat alone and didn't ask for permission to breathe. You see that old guy? Leon muttered to his crew on the yard. Walks like he's better than the rest of us. We'll teach him the rules. But Elijah didn't need to be told the rules. He wrote them once. In blood and sand, halfway across the world that night. After dinner, Leon and his crew cornered him in the corridor between the showers and the laundry room. No cameras, no guards, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the stink of bleach and sweat. Hey, old man, Leon said, stepping forward with a crooked grin. You forgot to pay your welcome fee. Elijah didn't respond. Leon's smile twitched. You deaf or just stupid? Still, Elijah didn't move. His breathing was steady, measured. The first punch came fast, but not faster than Elijah's reflexes. He caught the attacker's arm mid-swing, twisted the wrist at an angle it was never meant to turn, and slammed the man against the wall with a crack that echoed down the hall like a gunshot. The second man hesitated. Elijah didn't. He stepped forward, ducked under a wild swing, and drove his elbow into the guy's sternum with surgical precision. The man dropped, gasping, crawling like an animal that didn't know how it got hit. Leon blinked. The smirk was gone. What the hell? Before he could finish, Elijah was in front of him, faster than any man that size should be. Leon's knife came out, sharp and trembling. Elijah didn't back up. He stepped in, grabbed Leon's wrist, and whispered, just loud enough for only him to hear, you brought a blade to a war you don't understand. Then he disarmed him. Then he broke him. And when the guards finally arrived, called in by panicked yelling from the second tier, they found 4 men on the ground, bleeding, moaning, one with a dislocated shoulder, one clutching his ribs, 2 with eyes wide open like they'd seen a ghost, and Elijah. He just stood there, hands behind his back, calm. He looked at the warden and said the only words anyone would hear him speak that day. I was defending myself. The incident report was vague. The cameras had somehow glitched, and the gang? They stopped talking. Whispers spread that night like wildfire. Who was he? Where'd he learn to fight like that? Why didn't he speak? Some said he was ex-military. Others thought he was a hitman doing time for someone else's crimes. But no one could prove anything. Elijah Kane didn't correct the rumors because the truth was far worse. He wasn't just a soldier. He was dealt a force, classified missions, zero records, a ghost in the system, and the men who had tried to break him had just survived a warning because Elijah hadn't even fought back yet. Not really, not like he used to, not like he still could, and deep down, they all knew they'd picked the wrong man to mess with. The air on the yard that day was thick with heat, thick with tension, and thick with something no one could quite name yet. Elijah Kane stood by the way track, alone, his hands gripping the steel bar like it weighed nothing. The plates clanged with a dull echo as he pressed them upward in a slow, methodical rhythm. Around him, the yard buzzed with the usual chaos, inmates shouting over card games, the rhythmic thud of a basketball on cracked pavement, a fight nearly breaking out near the fence, but Elijah moved like none of it touched him, like he was somewhere else, somewhere far quieter, somewhere dangerous. He felt them before he saw them, 5 of them, closing in like wolves. Not the same crew from the shower corridor. That crew was still licking their wounds and avoiding eye contact. No, this group was younger, cockier. Rumor had it Leon Gage, the Vulture's leader, had promised reputation points to anyone who could humble the quiet old man, and these boys were eager to earn their stripes. They moved like they'd practiced this, 2 from behind, 2 from the sides, 1 directly in front, arms crossed, trying to look casual as he flicked a switchblade. Open behind his thigh, Elijah exhaled. He stood slowly, stretching out his arms like he was just finishing a set. His face gave nothing away. No fear, no confusion, no attempt to run or even defend. The leader stepped forward, trying to project dominance. No sudden moves, old man, he said, low and cold. But Elijah didn't move, didn't blink, didn't flinch. His fingers twitched just once, a habit, a reflex. Like a shadow from the life he used to live, where a twitch meant a trigger, and silence was the most dangerous noise of all. Leon sends his regards. The kid smirked. He lunged. The blade came fast low, aimed to slice across Elijah's midsection, but it never landed. In a blur, Elijah's body twisted, one hand grabbing the attacker's wrist, the other pinning his elbow. With a sharp jerk and a sickening crack, the man screamed and dropped to the ground, his blade clattering uselessly on the concrete. Before the others could react, Elijah stepped into the chaos like he was walking through memory, muscle memory. The second attacker came in with a chain. Elijah ducked beneath the swing, slammed his shoulder into the guy's ribs, and spun him into the steel fence. The chain dropped, so did the man. Now there were 3. The third tried to run, panic overtaking pride, but Elijah was faster. He moved like a shadow stretching across firelight. One moment the man was sprinting, the next Elijah was behind him, sweeping his leg and driving him face first into the ground. To left, they circled like they were rethinking every decision that had brought them to this point. The fourth pulled a shank and shouted, desperate now, more bark than bite. Stay back, man. I swear, but Elijah didn't. He advanced. No rage, no shouting, just precise, lethal calm. The man stabbed forward, wild, untrained. Elijah caught his wrist mid-thrust, turned his hips, and sent the man flying over his shoulder. With brutal efficiency, the thud of the body hitting concrete silenced the yard. The fifth man backed away slowly, hands raised. I ain't part of this, man. I didn't know. Elijah stepped forward once. The man bolted, didn't even look back. And then, it was over, just like that. The yard, which moments ago had been filled with noise and motion, now stood frozen in stunned silence. Even the guards, high above in their towers, weren't sure whether to sound the alarm or just watch. Elijah turned, picked up the barbell he'd dropped earlier, and sat back down on the bench like nothing had happened. He lifted, slow, controlled, like he was still warming up. It wasn't until the guards came rushing down that the spell broke. They barked orders, drew batons, cuffed him, but even they hesitated to touch him too roughly. One of them, Officer Vickers, had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He knew that kind of stillness, that kind of training. He looked into Elijah's eyes and didn't see a prisoner. He saw a ghost. 3 of the gang members were taken to the infirmary. 1 needed stitches, 1 had cracked ribs, the one with the broken wrist wouldn't be holding anything for weeks, and Elijah He didn't have a scratch on him. That night, Block C was quieter than usual. The whispers started like raindrops. Did you see that? Man moved like a damn ninja. He used to be something. I know it. By the time lights went out, everyone had a different story. One said Elijah was CIA, another claimed he was a government experiment gone rogue. One guy swore he'd seen him in a grainy photo from the Gulf War, a man with the same eyes, standing behind a general half-blurred, like he wasn't supposed to be there, but no one dared speak to him directly. He just sat on his bunk, eyes closed, replaying the moves in his mind, not because he had to, but because he needed to stay sharp. He knew this wasn't over. The vultures wouldn't stop. Not now. Someone was going to dig deeper. Someone would pull his file. And when they did, they'd find more than they could handle. But until then, Elijah would wait, and the next time someone tried to test him, he wouldn't stop at a warning. Warden Gerald Haskins had walked these prison halls for over 20 years. He'd looked into the eyes of serial killers, cartel assassins, and ex-gangsters turned preachers. He thought he'd seen everything a man could hide behind a stare. But the first time he looked at Elijah Kane through the security monitor alone in his cell, sitting perfectly still, as if waiting for a war that hadn't yet begun, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't fear. Exactly. It was deeper, older, like when you walk into a room and suddenly remember a dream that never ended well. 3 inmates still lay in the medical wing. One had his arm in a sling, another hadn't spoken since he woke up. The guards gave conflicting reports. Some said it happened too fast. Others claimed Kane never even touched one of the men. They just fell. The footage from the yards. Corner camera? Static, entirely corrupted. A tech later confirmed there was no physical damage to the unit. Just a strange blackout in the feed that lasted exactly 23 seconds, the precise window of the assault. Something wasn't adding up. Haskins ordered Kane's file from central intake. He expected a sheet or two. Age, crime, sentence, maybe a gang affiliation or two. Instead, he received a slim, red stamped folder that looked like it had been mailed through 10 hands and blacked out by 12. The first thing that caught his eye was the word at the bottom, Classified Department of Defense. Clearance required. What the hell? He muttered. There was no arrest report, no background history. Just a single sentence under charges, held under sealed indictment, federal custody transfer for 389B. There was a military section, but it didn't list a branch. Just this, service record, redacted unit designation, redacted combat deployments. Redacted status, disavowed disavid. Haskins leaned back in his chair. He wasn't new to shadow bureaucracy. He'd had his share of black bag transfers and hush orders, but this smelled different. He picked up the phone and called a contact in Washington. An old favor owed, buried deep in the halls of Homeland Security. This is Haskins. I need a trace on an inmate transferred to Fulton Penitentiary. Name's Elijah. Kane, files marked Dodd classified. There was silence on the other end. Gerald, the voice finally said, low and hesitant, where did you say he was? Fulton, arrived 3 weeks ago. More silence. Then just one sentence, sharp and heavy, whatever you do. Don't mess with him. That man trained ghosts. The line went dead. Haskins stared at the phone. Trained ghosts? He looked back. At the monitor, Kane hadn't moved, still sitting, still breathing like a metronome. That night, something else happened. The Aryan Brotherhood, bitter about the attention the vultures had drawn, decided to send their own message. Kane wasn't part of any race that made him fair game to everyone. To them, he was a threat simply because he didn't kneel. 3 of their men cornered him near the electrical wing, just after lights out. No guards, no witnesses, just the hum of dying fluorescent bulbs. But something unexpected happened before they even got close. The entire block lost power. Everything went dark. Every hallway, every cell, every camera feed. In the control room, officers scrambled, generator backups offline. One shouted. Another swore he saw a breaker trip on its own. No human interference, no short circuit, just off. And then silence. For 60 long seconds, the prison held its breath. When the lights flickered back to life, chaos didn't follow. Stillness did. 3 Aryan Brotherhood inmates were found unconscious, one with his jaw shattered, another with deep bruising. Across his ribs and spine, the third with both kneecaps broken precise, controlled fractures. Medical staff said it looked surgical, like someone knew exactly how to immobilize without killing, but the strangest thing? No one saw Kane leave his cell. He was sitting right there when the lights came back on, calm, breathing, just like before, except now, everyone watched him differently. The guards kept their distance. The inmates whispered like he was part myth, part curse. No one claimed the assault. No one snitched. Even the Brotherhood leader, a man covered head to toe in prison ink and swastikas, avoided his gaze when they passed in the corridor. That week, Elijah Kane was called into a private room for psychological evaluation, the prison's forensic psychiatrist. Dr. Amanda Farrell had worked with disturbed minds for 15 years, but this one didn't blink. Elijah, she said softly, voice calm, recorder running. You've been involved into violent altercations, both with no clear provocation. Would you say you have anger issues? Elijah looked at her finally, and spoke. No, I have control issues. I control everything around me. And when I lose that control, people get hurt. She paused, scribbling notes. Were you trained to do what you did? He didn't answer. Were you? Special forces? His eyes narrowed, but not in anger, in memory, in loss. I was part of something that doesn't exist, he said, and I was told to forget it, but sometimes it doesn't forget me. She ended the session early. Back in his cell, Elijah lay on his bunk staring at the cracked ceiling. Somewhere deep in the building, gears turned. People made calls, files were pulled again. Background checks were run not on Elijah, but on those who'd been near him. Guards, medical staff, even the warden. Elijah knew the pattern. First the questions, then the silence. Then someone would come, not to visit, but to recruit or to kill. He was no longer just a man in prison. He was a variable, a threat, a ghost that wasn't supposed to be breathing. But for now, he waited because Elijah Kane wasn't done, and neither were the men who buried him. It started with the black SUV, not the prison van, not a government-marked vehicle, just a sleek, silent black SUV with tinted windows that rolled through the gates of Fulton Penitentiary like it didn't need permission. It parked near the administrative wing, away from the eyes of inmates and guards alike. 2 men stepped out, sharp suits, black shoes, identical aviator sunglasses. They moved with precision, the way soldiers do when they've long since traded their uniforms for silence. The front desk didn't question their credentials. No one did. Their clearance came from somewhere far above the warden's pay grade. Elijah Kane knew they were coming before they walked through the door. He sat upright in the interrogation room, hands cuffed, posture relaxed. The walls were cold concrete, the air thick with the kind of silence that doesn't come from a lack of sound but from too much tension. When the door opened, he didn't flinch, didn't look surprised. He simply looked up, eyes steady. "Mr. Kane," one of the men said. "Not offering a name, we need to talk." The other closed the door and set a black folder on the table. Thick, heavy, labeled with a 3-digit number. Elijah recognized, Project 17 San Miguel Cartel Containment. He raised an eyebrow. That file was buried 5 years ago. The man nodded. It was, until now. They sat across from him. No introduction, no small talk, just the truth, cold and fast. The San Miguel Cartel has resurfaced. We intercepted communications between known affiliates inside Fulton Pen. They're planning something laundering. Through inmate accounts, transferring messages through the laundry unit, possibly targeting federal witnesses being held in temporary blocks. We believe you're the only person alive who can read their pattern. Elijah gave a humorless chuckle. You want me to clean up your mess? From behind bars? They didn't answer. Instead, one of them slid a burner phone across the table. No SIM card, just a single encrypted number preloaded. We're not asking for cooperation, the other man said. We're giving you a chance to correct an unfinished mission. Elijah didn't touch the phone. Not yet. He leaned forward slowly, letting the weight of his silence fill the room. You burned my name, he said. You buried me so deep. The earth forgot I existed, and now that the ghosts are walking again, you come back, hoping I'll just play along? The man closest to the door shifted, uncomfortable, but the one across from Elijah didn't move. His voice was calm, measured. We're not here for forgiveness. We're here for results. And with that, they left. The phone remained .no threats. No promises, just a silent understanding if he picked up that phone, the rules of this prison would change. That night, Elijah stared at the device for an hour before dialing. The call lasted 14 seconds. No greetings. No names, just a single phrase. It's Kane, initiate sweep. The line cut. By morning, the winds had shifted inside Fulton. 2 guards were escorted out in silence. No explanation, no warnings. They didn't even pack their lockers. One was known for losing mail on purpose, the other for being too friendly with certain inmates. Neither was seen again. Later that day, a memo hit the warden's desk. Reassignment, effective immediately. Gerald Haskins was transferred to an administrative role at a remote federal holding facility in Nebraska. No cause listed, no appeals, and then came the final strike. Eduardo El Lobo Santiago, suspected cartel lieutenant, currently serving 20 years on weapons trafficking, was found in the laundry room, unconscious. No witnesses, no cameras, just blood, every bone in both. His hands was shattered. Not randomly, systematically, each joint fractured with surgical precision, the kind of damage that screams discipline, not rage. A message, one that only men from a certain world would understand. It didn't take long for the rest of the prison to realize the hierarchy had changed. Cartel inmates went quiet, the brotherhood stayed in their cells. Even the vultures, once hungry for vengeance, turned their eyes elsewhere, because no one knew who Elijah Kane really worked for anymore. Some said he'd taken control of the prison from the inside. Others whispered that the guards answered to him now, that the warden's removal had been a silent coup, that Kane had a line straight to Washington. No one spoke his name above a whisper. No one met his eyes. He had become more than a prisoner. He was a presence, a warning. A ghost wrapped in orange, and through it all, Elijah remained still. He walked the yard like nothing had changed, ate his meals without haste, slept without flinching, but deep in his chest, a familiar fire had reignited, not for vengeance, not for power, for order, because men like Kane don't crave chaos. They end it. That night, as rain tapped against the cell block windows, Elijah stared through the bars into the storm. He had cleaned their mess, sent their message, broken their man, but he knew something they didn't. Cartels don't forget, ghosts don't stay buried, and the worst storms come after the quiet. Elijah Kane wasn't finished, not yet. It was a gray morning, the kind where even the sun seemed reluctant to rise. The clouds hung low over Fulton Penitentiary, dragging shadows across the yard as though the earth itself wanted to forget what had happened there. The gates groaned. Open slow, mechanical, impersonal. And just like that, without ceremony, Elijah Kane stepped into the world again. No press, no cameras, no family waiting outside. Just silence. His jumpsuit had been replaced with civilian clothes, gray shirt, black coat, plain jeans, clothes that didn't fit the man but masked him well enough. He walked with no duffel bag, no paperwork, no guard escort, just a single step and then another, as if he had never been there at all. The guards didn't make eye contact. Even the warden's replacement, a man who had never spoken directly to Kane, watched him from behind a reinforced glass window, heart pounding. Elijah had become a name that traveled in whispers through the prison halls, a story passed between men who'd seen too much and still couldn't believe what they'd seen. No official record ever confirmed what happened in cell block C. No paperwork ever listed the laundry room incident. No reports mentioned the reassignment of multiple guards or the black SUV that came and went without clearance. Even the internal files had been purged, replaced by a single line in the system, release approved per federal directive. But the inmates remembered, and as Elijah passed the main corridor past rows of cells filled with men who once ruled by fear and now lived in awe, someone shouted, "Yo, who were you, man?" It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even curiosity. It was reverence, the kind reserved for war heroes, ghosts, or gods. Elijah stopped just for a second. He turned his head slightly, meeting the young inmate's wide eyes. "I was the guy who made sure you woke up this morning." And then he walked on. No raised voice, no swagger, just that one line. Behind him, a silence fell across the block that not even steel bars could hold back. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled like something clean, something rare, freedom. But for Elijah, freedom was never about the absence of walls. It was about balance. It was about walking through fire and emerging with your soul intact. He didn't head to a bus stop, didn't wave down a cab. He walked mile after mile, through broken roads and quiet back streets, until the prison disappeared behind him like a bad dream he'd finally woken from. The city was different now, faster, colder, faces glued to phones, people brushing past without looking. But Elijah wasn't looking to be seen. He moved like a ghost, invisible to a world that had once written him off. By midday, he reached a modest diner tucked between two warehouses. The bell over the door jingled when he stepped inside, the waitress mid-40s. Tired eyes, ink on her wrist, gave him a look. "You look like you've been somewhere," she said. "I was," Elijah replied, sitting down. "Coffee, black." She brought the cup without asking for payment. "You military?" she asked. He nodded once. She didn't ask which war, because some men carry battles in their posture, not their uniforms. He drank slowly, eyes scanning the room out of habit, the back exits, the glass reflections, the angle of the sun coming through the blinds, still trained, still watching, but not hunted anymore, just aware. After the coffee, he left a $20 bill on the counter and walked out. Hours passed. The city breathed and buzzed around him, but Elijah moved through it with the calm of someone who no longer owed anything to anyone. Not the government, not the prison system, not even the ghosts that used to visit him in his sleep, because this wasn't just the end of a sentence. It was the closing of a chapter. He had buried the names, served the silence, paid the price. He was done, or at least he hoped he was. Later that evening, just as the sun dipped behind the skyline, he found himself standing by the river, the same place he used to come before he disappeared into the shadows. The water hadn't changed. It still moved with purpose, still carried everything away. Eventually, he watched it in silence, and for the first time in a long time, Elijah Kane exhaled, not out of exhaustion, but release, because what the world never knew was that he never should have gone to prison in the first place. His trial had been buried under secrecy, the charges manufactured to cover up an operation that went too far, too deep, a mission that had gone sideways because he'd refused to carry out an order that would have killed innocent people, so they made him vanish, not kill him, not honor him, just erase him. And now they had quietly let him go, because when the system builds you in the shadows, it can only release you in silence. Elijah turned from the water and walked away. No destination, no plan. Just forward, because men like him don't retire, they endure, and maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, someone still remembered the name Elijah Kane. But for now, he was just a man with a story no one would ever read, walking free, not because the system let him go, but because he had handled it his way.